I don't know. I feel like I am literally drowning. That is how I physically feel.
Why? I mean, I know why. Not everything, but I have a general sense of what's going on.
Gosh, it has been a very challenging year. This podcast is brought to you by Andersen. When making decisions on the product you spec, we're always thinking about what's right for the customer and what the specific project's needs are. We're also thinking about our reputation, and Andersen knows that the product they manufacture are part of the legacy that we're all trying to build.
From Fibrex composite material that delivers performance and looks at a budget-friendly price point to the Easy Connect reinforced joining system that makes it easier to assemble oversized window walls with less people, to Andersen's best performing A-series product line with the most energy efficient windows and doors Andersen has ever offered. Whatever your building needs are, they've got you covered. Andersen knows it's about fewer callbacks and products that will perform over time. That's why they test their products beyond the threshold required by the industry.
Andersen appreciates that. While it may be their products going into our projects, it's ultimately our brands that we're building. And they're proud to be helping us craft our legacies. Learn more about their product offering at andersenwindows.com.
So, how do you become the GC every sub wants to work with? Get on board with construction management software like Buildertrend. The platform gives subs access to an online portal where they can view a project schedule, send your team a message, and participate in the bidding process. That is convenient. It makes their job easier, increases the chance they'll choose to work with you again on future projects.
So to see more about Buildertrend's sub portal in action and learn how you can go from it's complicated to hashtag relationship goals with every sub you hire, go to buildertrend.com/MC demo and schedule a call with their team. It has been a very challenging year in a lot of ways. And I think to summarize, um, people have been extremely challenging. And I was reflecting on this. Well, I have actually been reflecting on it for a few months. But more recently, just, thinking about where I went wrong. And I know the immediate reaction is like, oh, it's not always you. Like it's, and I understand that. But the reality is, I think for a long time, I was trying to communicate what I wanted by coding it with what people wanted. Where it's like, hey, I'm gonna tell you kind of what like you want to hear, but underneath that, if you dig a little deeper, is actually what I want to be doing. Um, and that might sound very like wildly exaggerated, because it probably is to some extent. But the reality is, man, like I don't know, people are just very difficult, and ultimately, I try extremely hard to sway for everyone and adapt and offer what everyone wants, only to find out that people don't want to be here and they aren't cued into what my goals are, and that's okay.
Do you feel that your goals are grossly different than what other people want?
No, but I think that my willingness to do what it takes is grossly different.
All right, explain.
I am. I mean, I am way more willing to take risk. And cut. Is it cut teeth? Is that the saying? Cut teeth when I need to get shit done. And when I'm faced with adversity, I in the moment might struggle with it and start off a podcast by taking a deep sigh and telling you that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But the reality is that I will then kind of plant my ass in a seat and figure shit out. Dude, you are wearing an old t-shirt.
Oh, am I? I forgot I was wearing this today. Every place that I went into, people were like, "What company are you with?" And I was like, "TRG Home Concepts," and they were looking at me funny, and I didn't realize it until I walked out of the, paint store and I caught my reflection in my truck, and I was like, "Oh, I have an NS Builder shirt on."
That is amazing.
Um, yeah, so this one is old, but
Mm.
it's in the normal rotation. This is like a work, but not work shirt.
I
Like,
appreciate that.
if I get it dirty, I'm okay with it, but I, like, wouldn't wear it to work.
It's funny, we just completely changed the subject, but my brother texted me the other day. He goes, "Hey, do you remember Rodney, the guy that used to plaster for you?" I was like, "Yeah." Like I haven't worked with Rodney in years. He's just a smaller outfit and just does smaller stuff, and he doesn't go to the city. And he goes, "I had him come down to my house to patch the ceiling." I'm like, "Oh, cool." He goes, "He literally walked in with your sweatshirt on." And I'm like, I remember giving it to him and how he said that it was like his favorite sweatshirt, but I'm like, that dude wore it all the time.
Yeah,
And it's been a good 5 plus years. So that
that's
sweatshirt is
amazing.
he's got a lot good cost per wear on that thing.
Um, so, isn't that to be expected? And, like, I know that that's
Yeah,
gonna be the argument, right?
yeah, no, I know that. And I don't know. I think I'm struggling with it because there's been both. There's been people that have quit. Been people that we've let go, and it's also came in fast and furious. And so it's not like, and I support people that want to leave. Like they have my full support. I try to understand why they're leaving, like what were the reasons, to understand like how I can be a better leader. But ultimately, like I understand that they're making the decision for them, and for a long time, I would fight for people, and that never really played out well because they were checked out, and then I convinced them to stay, and then the reality is it's not it doesn't work.
It's just
Like
costing you more money
it's
to
it,
have
it
them.
yeah, and ultimately they were checked out, and if they're checked out and it's not a hell yeah I want to be here, then it's got to be let them move on, and it's a no. But I I don't know. I really don't know what
Okay, so from an outsider's perspective, everyone sees social media presence, what you're
yeah, man.
doing, the success of your business, the projects that you're doing, and I'm sure that a lot of people want to come and work for you. um, and then they
Yeah, and
get
that's what
in.
I'm afraid of, Tyler. Like that, sorry to cut you off, but that's what I'm afraid of is that, you know, someone there's been a couple scenarios where people have come and worked, and you had the same thing. It's like, oh, on social media it looked way different.
Yeah, thought
Um
it'd be easier.
yeah, that or just like, oh, I thought, oh, I thought you had your shit together. And it's like, no, the reality, like there is part of me that or there is part of everyone that on social media you're filtering, sometimes for business example, or for business as an example, you are oftentimes kind of showing best case scenario or like how you want to be operating. um and I'm not I'm not an exception there. Like there's things that I talk about and that even like we'll talk about on the podcast or at the Contractor Coalition Summit. It's like, yeah, I mean, this is the way that we have it structured. Like quote unquote on paper, this is the way we do it. Meaning there's a process that we wrote. This is how we do it. That doesn't mean that we don't sway from that or something changes and it doesn't happen that way. Um and I I'm trying to be more aware of that when I'm talking to new people. And so we've been interviewing a lot of people for many, many months, like before we had a bunch of people leave. Because we're in this process of growing. We have, all the amazing opportunities in the spring and the summer that we want to be prepared for. So we have been actively hiring. And more recently, I've been interviewing a lot of I'm kind of like on interview number 2 or 3, and had 2 today. And I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna be super raw and just tell them exactly who I am and what I'm like to work for in my own version." And I'm just straight up saying, I'm like, "Listen, I'm not gonna be the easiest person to work for." and because I'm going to have on like ridiculously high standards that or expectations of you. And, and that's going to be a challenge, and I know that. And I'd rather tell you that now than have you come in and think that we operate at a 90% when I'm going to push you to be 98%.
Do you think that most people, like, is it ignorant of people to think that it's going to be easy working for somebody who has
I
high
don't know.
standards?
I don't
Like,
know.
it's almost as if, haven't you worked in the construction industry before
But
to
the
know that?
construction industry is a mess, dude.
I know, but that's what it's like. So to come into your business and be like, yeah, there's going to be an aspect of that that's a mess. Like you can you can put whatever you want forth on social media in your life, but you're dealing with the construction industry.
I
You
think
are
it's
in
I
the
think it's
construction industry. It's going to be a mess no matter what level you are within that industry. But if you are trying to manage that industry to uphold a higher level, it's going to be that much harder.
yeah, I think that is not directly, but I think it can be related to experience and age. I think the younger people have a different understanding because they haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
I don't
It
know.
it just seems as though it's common sense to me. Like,
Totally. And
if
and when I walk a job and there's like mistakes happening, I'm looking at that. I'm like, Can anyone explain to me how that happened?"
yeah,
Because it's pretty obvious. Like why is that done like that? And everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I know. Like we gotta figure that out." It's like figure it out. Like we're reacting to something that could have been prevented.
yeah. And there's certain things that are not preventable, I get that. And
Totally.
then there's the things that are not preventable during that course and that project are definitely preventable the next time around.
Mhm.
But, like, I don't think that, and it's it's a mix. I don't wanna say this with, like, one I don't wanna blanket this statement completely, but most of the contractors that are executing at a very high level or builder, it's not necessarily because their workforce or their sub pool is that much better than everyone else. Like, I do believe they are better and they're at a different price point and everything else, but a lot of that is due to management and
Mhm.
systems and the standards that you uphold, and with that is going to be more stress, more headache. You're going to have a tighter leash. You're going to have to understand the design of the project. And there's a lot more communication and management that needs to be put in place. It's not as if, oh, we're a top tier builder, we use this team of subs and we can just set them loose and they everyone just executes because we pay them more. It's like, no, it may be the same sub that you
Yeah.
use. They just know when they're on my job, certain guys have to be there and they have to execute at a different level. But if you're not there, and that's something that I implemented recently with, like, charging for management. If you're not there, they're just going to do what gets them out of there sooner because they have another builder breathing down their throat.
And the thing there is like for me, I'm trying to hire people to be in that position where I don't need to be there. And the reality is like I think that one thing I realized is that I've relinquished too much of too much control.
Yeah.
And that's in a variety of different things within my business that have all come crashing into me all in one shot. So I'm like, okay, let me catch my breath and let me figure out like what one I'm going to tackle first. But from the team and like the like I'm thinking about project management and site superintendent, like that side of it is no, the here's your roles, here's your responsibilities. Like, one of the things I talked about before is, oh, they everyone wants a career path. I've got that. Like, here's everything. Here's what I expect of you. Here's how you can grow. Here's what your future could look like. Execute on that. And the reality is like, few people will look at that and really execute upon that and measure their own success on that. But here I am thinking like, all right, if I outline this, then this person should be able to step in and be able to pull this off with an understanding of how we are, um, how we're operating, and how we're managing the site, and supervising the site. The but and I'm thinking that we like the team can do it. Like I can step back and I can then go focus on business. But then my team, example, like I'll get on the job site. Hey, why isn't this done? Oh, I can't get in touch with that guy. What do you mean you can't get in touch with that guy? It's like, well, I called him, I texted him, I emailed him, like he's just not picking up, and like, I just so in my mind, the what frustrates me the most is I know if I text that guy, he's going to write me right back.
Yeah.
And it's a double-edged sword because if I do, he'll write me right back and he'll show up on the job site by tomorrow morning. But if I do and he writes me back and he shows up the next morning, guess who has to text him the next time?
Yeah.
Me. And and I got really frustrated with one of my supers a couple of years ago because I showed up on the job site and the tile guys weren't on site. And I'm like, "Where are the tile guys?" And like we're in the middle of this extremely complicated install. It's a multi-day, like large format install, and it's 9:30. He's like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean?
You don't know.
Like, what do you mean you don't know? He's like, I called him, no reply. I text him, no reply. Like, I and it's like we're just sitting here twiddling our thumbs, waiting. Like, yeah, sure, you're doing something else, but like we're not making progress on one of the most important parts of this project. So I left. I drove to the guy's shop, and I walked in the showroom, walked by the lady at the front desk, went into the back shop, and sure enough, there he is. I'm like, "What's up?" He goes, "Not much." I'm like, "Why aren't you on the job site?" He goes, "Oh, I've just cut in a couple last pieces." I'm like, "Cool. Why aren't you answering my super?" He's like, I'm just cutting a couple pieces on the CNC, and we'll be over there. So I just figured I'd see him when I got there." And it's like, why did I have to drive there?
Yeah.
Why didn't the super drive there?
So, do you do you think that by you growing and basically you've gotten into this cycle of saying this is going to be hired out and then pulling your hands from that at that point is it's not possible with the setup that you have,
I
or
think
that's
that
where a lot of your struggle is coming from?
that's weird. I just got goosebumps. Because I feel like this is one of the more humbling things that is. If I say it's humbling, does that make it not humbling?
I don't know.
Whatever. I feel like this is me being humble about the situation, and I think you know the reality is that we grew very fast, and I let go of too much control of too many things because we were growing so fast that unrealistic I had expectations of people that turned out to be unrealistic.
Yeah, and I think that like one of the issues with our industry big picture and the way that we're structured is you look at any other industry, whether it's a startup with a dozen people, or a larger corporation with thousands of people, and the management system is multi-level,
Mhm.
and the management also overlaps.
Yeah,
In
and that's good.
in our industry, it's almost as if like the management is exclusive to that person or that project. There's no fail safe. There's no overlap of management.
Mhm.
There's no levels of management. And I think that it ends up coming down to one person being in control of a lot of people and not and having too much on their plate. And there's only one person who's there to check on everyone. And I think that we need it's just impossible to do with the budgets, but there needs to be secondary management. There needs to be somebody else that's covering. And when you start splitting that into multiple jobs now with one person managing all of that, there's just too many moving parts going. And I think when you pull any sort of secondary management off and there's nobody there to bounce things off of, as there's nobody there to catch those small things as they're happening, um, that it just creates a lot of issues. I know listening to my wife's calls and the stuff that she does in a day, half the time I'm like, I just feel like you could have got this done with a text message, a conversation, not held a meeting.
Right.
But then when you realize that like what they're doing, and the capacity of what they're handling, and then the potential failures that they're looking to mitigate, it
Mhm.
moves slower, but they're not paying to do things 2 and 3 times,
Yeah.
which our industry is just like go, go, go. There's no moving slow. It just you're almost putting people in place and then trying to figure it out as you go, and it doesn't really lend itself to the type of management structure that we have.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of it's like, and this is I think where a lot of people get stuck in this industry, is that when they do grow and they run into these challenges, they go, Screw it, I'm just going to do it myself. I'll be small, I'll do a couple projects. It'll be a better life to live, a better um
It's just more manageable, but
yeah,
like it's all that
quality of life is what the word I was
it
thinking.
is quality of life, but it's also it's just it's less, right? So you're
Hmm.
for me, I run into a lot of the same issues. It's just more manageable because I have one project going on. I'm not necessarily having 2, 3 in design phase where I'm spread so thin. But so normally a lot of the issues can be caught beforehand, but they happen. I mean, like I know I've spoke offline to you about it, but like our project right now, we've had so many things come up and so many things that we've handled in stride and moved ahead. And obviously, we're behind schedule and over budget, but none of these have been on us. And we had an issue with floor finish where the entire first floor and stairs got stained the wrong color,
Yeah.
and like completely avoidable. And looking back, it's like, well, how can we avoid this next time? We did samples on the floor. We gave the designer samples, and at that point, it's like hand it off to the subcontractor. What more can I do except for maybe I handle mixing the stain myself so that like there's no issues because the it's so far off that it's not like an app. There's nothing happened in the field that could have made this happen the way that it happened. It was just a mistake. Something went wrong.
Hmm.
And in hindsight, it's like, well, they're behind schedule. They decided to, in order to us to get on to the job with the deadline that we set with Monday, they went in on a Saturday and stained, and then a Sunday and finished. So I'm not there on a Saturday or a Sunday, so the floor got stained and finished without me ever being there.
But look,
And
hold. Can I pause you? So I'm pretending that you're running a job for me, and the floor. I get there on Tuesday, and the floors are the wrong color, and you tell me, the only thing I could have done was mix the stain myself to make sure it match. Is isn't there other way? Like, wouldn't couldn't you have had the approved sample on site? Could you,
uh, we did all of that.
so when he was, I'm sorry, was it one of the samples that they do on the floor and then sand off?
Yes, but
Yeah.
also there was a sample stick.
So the sample stick, they didn't have it on site
I
while they were
think it was
staying,
just being behind schedule
and
and,
he
like,
just
pushing
rushed.
through,
Yeah,
and was like, "Alright, it's 3 of this to 1 of this,"
got it.
and was just, like, so far into the zone,
I got it.
that it got done and covered. And, like, truth be told, I came in and, like, I was like, "I don't really love this floor color," but didn't really think that much of,
Sure,
because, like, I was there for the conversation with him and the designer and, like, went over, made sure everything was approved, made the sample stick for them to check that everything was good on their end that they could take home.
but you didn't
Um,
check the sample. Like, you didn't get the sample put on the floor and be like, "Oh, that doesn't match."
no.
So,
Um,
and which is fine, right? Like, that shit happens. But in that situation, like, there would be, in theory, a process that would be either written down for like, this is what you do when you stain floors. Or for your case, one man show, like that's going to be in your brain
Yeah.
that when you show up on a Monday after the floor guys, you're just going to automatically go grab that sample stick, put it down, and be like, that doesn't match, guys. We have an issue.
Yeah, and it was pretty much immediate that we realized that the floor was the wrong color. But at that point, it was floor guy packed up onto another job,
Hmm.
floor stain, finished 2 coats. They were coming back at the end of the job to buff and refinish. And in my opinion, the best case at that point was to proceed with the job and then treat it as a refinish at the end of the job. So yeah, you're going to have to work around some stuff, but at least the rest of the job can proceed, because at that point it's
Sure.
like the downtime, I don't know if it makes sense. And then also there was the potential. I didn't know how far off the stain was
Hmm.
from the sample until like we confirmed how far off it was. So there was the chance that it was like, oh, it's close, it's just the shade darker. But then when we actually like put everything together and I got the sample stick back from the designer
Yeah.
and brought it there, that it like was not even close.
Hmm.
And it, in my opinion, it was like a stain measurement mixing issue.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, and like, yeah, 100% avoidable in many different ways. But when I look back on it, it's like if we're doing a full first floor and then there's going to be cabinets in and schedules tight and there's stairs and everything else, like, does it make sense to make sure that the designers are there to confirm the day that stain's happening? Like,
Hmm.
does it make sure I should be there, right? But it was like, oh, it's a Saturday, it's the weekend. I've worked with a sub before. It was like sample on the door on the floor,
Yeah.
sample stick. At this point, all the hard work was done. Like
Totally.
it I feel like you should, if that's what you've done for however long, like you should have that under control at that point to be like, yeah, I'm gonna stay Saturday and Sunday and knock it out. I kind of don't feel like I have to be there for that, but like maybe I do. Maybe it's like, no, you can't finish on Saturday and Sunday unless I can get out there. It has, like, I have to be there when you start to stain.
Hmm.
And I reached out to the customer, was like, hey, I know you guys want to get back in your house, and I apologize. Like, this is completely on me and should have been avoided, and I apologize for the delay. And he called me, he's like, no, you've dealt with so much throughout this project, there's so many balls up in the air, like, I understand, I feel badly for you guys having to redo it. But it's all there, it's all the same shit, it's just that I don't have 4 projects going on at once, and generally they're not massive, it's just more manageable
Hmm.
when you're small, which is where this conversation came from. So I don't have an opportunity to blame anyone else. I don't put anyone else in the position that it's up to them, and that there's less cooks in the kitchen, which
So
in my
yeah.
opinion in our industry generally means less mistakes, but they are still prevalent.
Hmm.
It's unavoidable.
Yeah. I mean,
But I really do think that, like, to hire, right? It's to think that you're going to be able to hire somebody and then hand that off and not still have your finger on the pulse of what's going on is in our industry just an impossibility.
and truthfully, I didn't think my finger was off the pulse in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. Like, and I'm on every project every week. And if I'm on site more than that allotted time, I'm just I'm I don't provide a ton of value.
Yeah.
And it's like unless I'm running the job, and I can't be running the job. And I think that for me, what the biggest thing is like I need to consider how I'm mentoring these guys and being a leader, and not only supporting but giving them the encouragement. And honestly, you know, I sat down with a couple people that ended up leaving, and we sat down, and I basically was like, "Hey, you're doing a good job, but I need you to do a great job." And I outlined specifically what where they were falling short. And, and that was a hard conversation. It wasn't taken very well. It wasn't designed to be this like ultimatum. It was, hey, these are the areas I need. Like, I don't need you to go and climb into a hole and work on these. I want these are the things that I need you to be better at, and let me know how we can work together. And I'm here to support that, and here to train that, and so on and so forth. Um, and it ultimately drove them out.
But
And
was it because they wanted you to actually help them
no,
with
they
these
they they
issues?
they told the conversation was, primarily centered around the fact that like it what that it's called a PIP. It's a performance improvement plan. So I suppose as an employee that doesn't register very positively. It basically says ship up or shape up. I mean,
Yeah.
shape up or ship out, right? And and I spent a lot of time like researching it and figuring out like how do I outline like a strategy, like a plan so we can work together on this. And this is what I came across is this pip plan, and I talked to a couple other builders and like, yep, this is what we use. It helps like really clarify the message, blah blah blah. So I'm like, great, this is what I need. I want something like formal so we can work together on it. And it wasn't received well. And I was like, listen, I'm not saying that your job is at jeopardy. Like, well, in this pip plan it does say that. I said, if you read the handbook, it also says I can fire you for zero reason.
Yeah.
It's employment at will. It's just legal language. Like it needs to say that for protection. And you can also quit for no reason. You can tell me I just don't want to work here anymore, and I can tell you I just don't want you to work here anymore. But the reality is like this is I want to help you be great, and I want to and at the end of the day, whether it was the honest truth or not, they both said that based on what I outlined on that, they'll never be able to meet that expectation, and they're gonna seek employment elsewhere.
But
And good.
do you feel as though like I understand that I don't think that that's maybe that was the final straw,
It
but
yeah.
I don't feel that that was like the impetus or
No,
the
it didn't go from
catalyst for
0 to
them.
100 there.
Yeah,
No.
but
I think
like do you think that and the only like analogy or comparison I could say to this is when you tell somebody like, "Hey, these are the issues. I want to be there for you to be able to work on this." It is I heard somebody once say, right, where if somebody like has a baby or somebody dies and they're like, "Let me know if you need anything."
mhm.
And that's for you, that's not for the person. That's so that you can sleep at night saying like, "Yeah, well,
I
I
offered,
offered."
yeah.
Where it's like, "Well, no, if you want to do it for them, you do it. You don't like put the ball in their court." And do you
Mhm.
feel as though this is the same scenario where they wanted you to just step up and take more ownership or take more control rather than offer to
That's a
take
great
more control?
that's a that's a great question. I
Because like
probably.
so what I look at it, right, and this is somewhat how we started this conversation where it's like a successful company, you get to do cool projects, you pay people well, you give them benefits. Like what are people's expectations and then why are they leaving? Because from an outsider's perspective looking in, it has all the right ingredients for a successful project, a successful job and working for you. So what is the like biggest gripe that people are having because you can pay them more, you can give them a company vehicle, all this stuff, which you've tried and it hasn't worked out. So like there has to be there has to be something that's that's not able to be offset by compensation that they're not happy with. And what like from an employer's perspective, what do you feel you could do differently from the get-go? And I I hear you saying where it's like level of expectation and like a path to succeed and everything else. But
I don't think
from
it's that. I
a
think it
simpler perspective, like, what
simpler
do you
pers
think could be could lead to a more successful employee retention?
I think that people I shouldn't say that. I I I know that people don't have an issue with my attention span. And I don't mean that in the sense of like ADHD or anything. I mean that in the sense that I have more than just NS builders going on,
Yeah.
and I'm pulled in all these different directions. And I can't remember if I made this analogy on this podcast or not, but it's kind of like I have 7 balls that I'm trying to push across a field, and I'm pushing a little one at a little bit each time, right? So for me to push 7 across a field is a lot harder. Like I'm not going to get very far. Where if I only had one, I could make it all the way across that field pretty quickly.
But if you had the proper structure set up, that really shouldn't like, access to
And
you shouldn't really
and
matter.
and I think that's my point, is that in my mind I've hired those people. I've built that structure. I've communicated this is how we're going to operate. And, in my mind, it's there. But to everyone else, it's not.
But so you sit down with one of these employees that's leaving, they want access to you, or do they just want somebody else to have their back? Like, if there were somebody else in place, would it
Mm,
have to be you?
I don't think it has.
Or do they are they and I know we've had a conversation
Mm,
along this line offline, but is it like they see what you're doing, they see your life, and then they're saying, "Hey, this is my project. I have all of this stress on my plate, and Nick's doing this, Nick has that." Like, would that be any different if you had somebody in a position, like another layer of
mm,
management, where whether they had your access to you or not, it wouldn't matter because they were feeling that they were taken care of? Or have you just you've created a system, or a company where you're so close to everyone and you're pretty much open book, that as soon as they feel they're overwhelmed or overstressed, that there's going to be some sort of resentment being formed?
hmm. That's a
Because
difficult. That's
I mean,
difficult. But I do want to answer that because I do think that it depends on the person. I think some people have an issue with what I do, and and where my focus is. And I think other people have an issue with not if they would be totally fine with someone else being in that role. They just need someone in that role. Where I think but I think other people are like, I don't want someone else in that role. I
yeah.
only want Nick in that role, and he's too focused on this or that. And that's something yes, like that is something that I'm challenged with a lot recently. Is like, am I trying to push too many balls across the field? And should I just focus on one thing? And someone was like, "Well, what would be that one thing?" You and I talked about it, but I also talked about it with a friend of mine that's outside of everything I do. And he was like, "What would be that one thing?" And I'm like, build houses." And he's like, "So just build houses?" I'm like, "That's what I want to do, but I also like filming them because I like sharing them." And it just compounded, and next thing I know, it's like I got a podcast, I got this, I got that, I got and it was like humorous in that conversation because it went from like one thing back to 7. And the reality is like, from a business perspective, I think this is where my head has been at recently. It's like, all right, why don't I just sit down and write down what each business is, and is it profitable? And let's just start there. Let's remove the emotion from it and just look at, are these profitable endeavors? Because the things that aren't profitable, well, what's the reason for doing them? If they're costing me money, I better have a good explanation as to the reason to do them. Like the podcast, for example, we don't make any, we don't take any money from this podcast. It's
Yeah.
something that we've just invested all of this time in. And, you know, here I am, and likely you, it's like, we just invest all this time because we think that maybe eventually this will all pay off. And sure, it's paid off here and there in these opportunities, no doubt. First off, everyone that's awarded us an opportunity for listening to this podcast, we are incredibly grateful for that. But my point is that it's
We're
something
not
that we
collecting a paycheck.
yeah,
Like, we're
it's not
not
something I
showing up and
show
like,
up
"Oh, I
and
just made $2,000 every time I sit down."
yeah, it's not and so okay, then get rid of it. And it's like, well, no, I don't want to get rid of it because of the opportunities. Like, all right, well, beyond the opportunities, what else is there? And it's like, well, we actually are building an asset. Like we have amazing listenership to this, and that's valuable. So there is that side of it where it's like we are investing sweat equity into something that should be valuable at the quote unquote end of it.
Do you so as you were talking before, I had, like, a very random thought that went through my head. Um, what are the age ranges of people who are leaving? Like, is it
Um,
more younger men and women who are leaving than older? I know that you have more younger, or, like, what's that conversation look
they're
like
all the
when
same age.
all the same age and it's all younger people, right?
Mhm,
Like our age or younger, right?
mhm.
So you're 37,
5.
35. Oh, I'm 37, so you wouldn't be 37. All right, so 35 and younger. And I look at my subs, for example, my stucco contractors on the project right now, and it's a girl whose company it is. She's younger than me, a woman. Uh, and it was a company that was passed to her. She shows up in like a white suburban that's probably, $90,000. And she has a bunch of older guys, very blue collar, who are working for her and have worked for them for 15, 20 years. And I'm just like, I know that they are not offering these guys what somebody like you would be offering. Like, I
Mhm,
know, and maybe the standard is not quite as high, but there's no young people working for them, or the young people have an attitude, or they feel as though they're entitled to more than this. And I oftentimes question if that's part of it, right? That, like, the younger generation of men and women, and I would consider myself part of that at
yeah,
37 years old. Like, I'm still young to be in this industry, but so many people who have worked for me, they just feel entitled to more. They feel entitled to what the owner of the company has, or what so and so has, because they're this age, but they haven't put the time and the energy, and they haven't exposed themselves to the same amount of risk. So what somebody else has within that business, like, the comparison just doesn't even make sense if you have never exposed yourself to the amount of risk. Sure, maybe you show up and you do your job every day and it's stressful, but, like, that's fucking life. Like, that's work, that's your
mhm,
job. And I find it hard to really side with them and feel a ton of compassion for them, where you even go back like 2 3 generations, you see memes about it. But it's like everyone now, it's, I'm so stressed and life is so hard and I can't make money. And then it's like your grandfather was literally 18 in a war getting shot at.
mm,
And like, what we complain about now, what we feel entitled to and justified now, I wonder if it's just the age group that you're marketing yourself towards, because I see so many older people working for construction companies, and the material companies that I go to, where it's like, I know that they're not getting compensated well. I know that they are not treated as like a valuable resource to these businesses, but they show up every day. They have a smile on their face. They do their job, and I'm like, there's no young people here. And it's
mm,
probably because they try it and then they're like, screw this. I'm not going to pay for the boss's new truck with big wheels on it.
mhm.
And I, like, can't help but think that that plays a
I
part in this.
I think it does play a part in it. I think it does play a part in it, and it's It's frustrating because there's so much opportunity out there too, where it's like everyone's always chasing that next opportunity, which I get. Like there, I everyone that's ever left, I support it. And anyone that I've ever let go, like I make that decision, for not just myself and my business, but also for them. Meaning, like, as sucky as that might be in the moment, like the reality is I know that that person needs to be somewhere else, because me keeping them around, especially if I don't want to keep them around, is putting them in a position that they're not going to ever succeed at, and that's unfair. So I'm making that decision for both of us, and just like when someone leaves, they're making the decision for them, but I will support that decision for them. I'm like, no problem. Like, if you need something, let me know. But it's always this chase of what that next opportunity is. And for me, in the moment, it's hard for me to deal with that. Where it's like I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, like, does that other builder have a better process that they're going to jump in, they're going to plug and play, and they're going to have a path to follow, and they're going to go from, like, where they're at to being like a top tier performer, and what do they have that I don't? And it's like I go down this like mental like black hole, and then I'm like, snap out of it, like, wait a second, just doesn't mean that they have a better situation. If it's better for them, great. But I gotta like, that is not a good use of my brain power to try to uncover those reasons. I will take the information, I will listen to it, and I need to move on. And
I
I
just
need
I look at, like, if you were to pull a dozen of your like, business owners within your network, be like, is it easy owning your construction company
no,
and
yeah,
operating it? Like, what would they say?
dude. I was
I-
just at
If
we're
you went to a dozen of your subcontractors and said, is this easy? Like, what would they say?
yeah. I mean, I
There's
was at
not anyone who's going to be like, this is easy.
right, and but so I'm at my Builder 20 group meeting last week. And yes, that is the shared sentiment across the board. And, builders that are very successful, and those that, are mildly successful, they all have that same. But there's a few that I've talked to that are like, you know what, man, it is pretty easy. And they're typically of an older generation, and they're just, they got their structure, and they're not chasing the high of growing or growth, or they've kind of nestled into what they're comfortable with, and maybe they're just having a great day. But yeah, I mean, that the shared sentiment is that this is hard. And anyone you talk to, like, what's your number one problem? It's people related, whether it's
Yeah.
hiring, whether it's culture, whether it's fit, whether it's retention, whatever it is, it's people related. It's the hardest part of running a business. And and it's the thing I'm struggling with the most, because I tend to be very hard on myself, in terms of, like, what did I do wrong, why is this happening, and how could I have prevented it, when the reality is there's some of this stuff that I can't prevent. And despite me hosting a team outing or not, like, that's not going to be what glues us together. It's, shared values, and shared desire to want to build cool ass shit.
Yeah.
And
It it's tough. And I think that the other battle that you face is that, like, the marketing for your business and the projects, it's all very cool. It looks very cool. And I don't think that a lot of people realize that that's just like the culmination of all these things, and that's the celebration of the entire project. But if you break that project down into 365 days, how many of those days feel like the end of that project? Like, and even the way that that project looks to everyone on the outside is not the
mhm,
way that that project looks to you when you're in it. So as a PM, as a sub, as a super, as an owner, that project that you've documented does not look the same as it does to me or a potential employee looking at it, right? You see all the cool things, and you see the details, and you see the products that were used, and it's just different when you are involved with it. It's not the same. It's the grass is always greener. It's chasing something else. It's the mistakes that you see.
Mhm.
And I think that the way that you document things lends itself to disappointment for people internally, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like if
I
if
think so, and
somebody
I think that people and I think people are very forward with that information, and, um, I mean, we'll stop there for a moment, but,
what's
the
his name said it best. Who's the guy we had on about sausage making? What was his name? The landscape guy.
the landscape guy.
The guy who, like, internet marketing the, Asian dude who was like, "Yeah, it's about the sausage making," that we cut the podcast short on.
Danny Wang?
Yeah, he said
Eh,
it best. Now
yeah.
it all makes sense now. It's coming full circle.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
mean,
Danny Wang say.
that's a fair analogy. I mean, it does. It looks great on the outside, but it's like, what did it take to get there? And, you know, that I guess that's what I'm having a hard time just, like, wrapping my head around it, is that not everyone wants to fucking bust ass and get shit done, and at all costs, and for that outcome.
Dude, look at every Olympic athlete or successful athlete.
Mhm.
They everyone celebrates them when they're successful, right?
Yeah,
You win an Olympic gold and it's like this was all worth it.
yeah.
But if you go inside of their day to day
It
for
sucks.
300 yeah, it's terrible. You are
Right.
just mentally and physically getting the shit beat out of you
Yeah.
and abusing your body and just building yourself up mentally and physically. Whoever can sustain the most amount of psychological and physical warfare ends up at the top of the podium. And like that's what everyone celebrates. That's what the commercials are about. That's what are on t-shirts and on posters.
Right.
Nobody's like showing them crying in a sweatsuit trying to drop 5 pounds to be able to get into a tournament. Like they're not showing any of that. And it's the same thing as building. And most people do, at the end of the day, like they don't want to get into that. It's just not it's not worth it to them, especially when maybe they don't have the ownership at the end of the day when the celebration isn't just about them. That's just the truth of the matter. Whatever thing that you see that's successful in life or appears to be amazing, or the life that people have made for themselves, you're just seeing like a sliver that's more than likely not indicative of everything that it took to get
Yeah.
there.
No,
And I
that's
I
fair.
don't th- I honestly think that like a lot of young men and women our age and younger, it's like there's other things that they can do with less stress and make equal money where it's like, yeah, it's just easier. I don't have to take this home with me, and I can't blame them for it,
I
but I think it's gonna be hard to find those people.
No, it's a great analogy about professional sports, because it's like, you don't wanna train 365 days a year, then don't be an Olympic athlete.
Yeah.
Like, be a normal athlete, or do pickup basketball on the weekends. Like, the you know, uh, and I think that's what I'm chasing. It's like, I wanna train every day and be better and better and better and better, and just have no field goal. Just, like, get to that point, and, yeah, we have a win every time we complete a project, right? But I want to be ruthless with the approach to get there.
I mean, everyone wants to be at the top step of the
Right,
podium. Everyone
but
wants the gold medal, but there's
yeah.
like
Hey, you can
only a
do that,
hand.
but you gotta train every single day, and get the shit kicked out of you.
Yeah,
Ah,
there's
forget
very
it.
few people who are willing to do that. And like maybe they're willing to do it for a
Yeah,
week or a month or
yeah.
a year, but like are you willing to do that for 20 years? Are you willing to do that for 30 years? And most people aren't. And that's like what it takes to get to the top of whatever you're doing. It's not you can't do it for 3 months and then be like, "All right, I can coast at this point."
No, you're right.
It's
Yeah.
it's got to be pretty relentless, and I don't think that most people are cut out for that. And that's not to say that that's the case with everyone. um but I also find it it to be like there's less people now that are just going to show up and stick around and be loyal and stay with you for 20 years regardless of compensation and everything else, when it's like, well, I could go work for somebody else and make the same amount and not have to worry about this.
Yeah.
And
And
the
that to me, like, is so not interesting.
Yeah, but that's what I think that
Yeah,
most people would gravitate towards.
that's fair. Well, that was an hour.
Damn, that was
I
fast.
I thought that I thought we were still on the introduction, to be honest.
I think we are.
Well, hey guys, real quick, a bunch of you guys reached out about our t-shirts. They are being printed, and I think they're going out next week. So if you haven't got your t-shirt, please be patient, and appreciate your patience. We had a huge order, so they're all being shipped the end of October. So you should have those. Make sure you post them on social media, get the drum rolling, and maybe we'll do another round or come up with another design. And we also got some bad ass pencils, but we'll share more about that later on.
Yeah, they're pretty sweet as well.
Guys, drop us a review on iTunes. It would be appreciated. Keeps us in the top spot for podcasts, especially in this industry. And we'll see you next week.
Sweet, thank you.